Boeing Starliner astronauts are now stuck in space after another delay. NASA is pushing back its return to Earth from the International Space Station after several previous postponements. NASA wants to do more checks following helium leaks and the failure of some maneuvering thrusters.
Boeing is taking another blow, and this time it's public and painful. NASA has delayed Boeing's Starliner capsule launch again, leaving Boeing employees at Cape Canaveral deflated. This mission was supposed to be the moment Boeing finally redeemed itself, but instead, they're back to square one. NASA announced that 2 astronauts who were set to return on Boeing's troubled Starliner will now have to rely on their rival SpaceX for rescue. Talk about adding salt to the wound. The Starliner's technical issues aren't new. They've been haunting Boeing since 2019, but this time it's downright embarrassing. Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, who went up in June for a simple 8-day mission, will now be spending the holidays and maybe even the new year stuck in space. Their original ride is leaking helium and can't get its thrusters to work properly. It's hard to imagine a worse situation for Boeing, especially with SpaceX stepping in as the hero. One Boeing employee didn't hold back, saying, "We've had so many screw-ups lately, we're under a microscope, and this just made things 100 times worse." And the worst part? SpaceX, the competitor Boeing loves to hate, is now their only lifeline. "It's shameful. I'm embarrassed. I'm horrified," the employee added. It's a rough day for Boeing, and it seems like the hits just keep coming. Boeing's Starliner program just can't catch a break, and now there's blame flying everywhere. Morale at Boeing is tanking, with some employees pointing fingers at NASA for their latest public humiliation. Boeing insists that their Starliner capsule could safely return astronauts from the International Space Station after its debut crewed flight on June 5th. But after 2 months of testing, NASA decided they didn't want to take any chances. Instead, they turned to Boeing's rival, SpaceX, to get their astronauts home. The issues with Starliner, a helium leak that started before liftoff and only got worse once it docked at the ISS. On top of that, the spacecraft's thrusters had multiple failures. While Boeing claims they've mostly fixed these problems, NASA wasn't convinced. They're opting to play it safe, announcing that astronauts Wilmore and Williams will return to Earth aboard SpaceX's Crew Dragon in February 2025. A Boeing worker summed up the frustration saying, "We knew Starliner could bring them home safely, but NASA didn't want to risk it. They're dealing with their own PR nightmare, and they can't afford to add 2 dead astronauts to the list." However, the worker stressed that Boeing would never have recommended using Starliner if they believed it was truly unsafe. Steve Stitch, who manages NASA's Commercial Crew Program, explained that there was a disagreement about risk in discussions with Boeing. Meanwhile, Boeing stayed quiet on NASA's decision to rely on SpaceX, only stating that their priority remains the safety of the crew and the Starliner. Boeing's been bleeding money on this program, spending over $1.5 billion more than the initial $4.5 billion contract with NASA. Their goal is to eventually have Starliner join SpaceX's Crew Dragon as NASA's second option for ISS transportation. But with setbacks like this, it's an uphill battle. And Elon Musk also recently revealed a chilling discovery about Boeing's Starliner program that has left the space industry buzzing. It turns out, the astronauts who were stranded aboard the International Space Station due to Starliner's failures were in far more danger than anyone initially realized. This revelation casts a harsh spotlight on the critical risks that come with space travel and raises serious concerns about the future of private space exploration. In the early 2000s, space exploration was still dominated by government agencies like NASA, but that began to shift when private companies started entering the game. One of the pioneers of this new era was Elon Musk's SpaceX, founded in 2002. Musk had ambitious goals, reducing the cost of space travel and even colonizing Mars. His vision quickly turned SpaceX into an industry leader, with the company creating groundbreaking technology like the Dragon capsule, designed to ferry astronauts to and from space. But SpaceX wasn't the only player vying for dominance. Boeing, a giant in aerospace, also wanted a piece of the action. In partnership with NASA, Boeing developed the CST-100 Starliner, which was supposed to be a competitor to SpaceX's Dragon capsule. Both companies were part of NASA's Commercial Crew program, which aimed to restore America's ability to launch astronauts into space after the retirement of the Space Shuttle in 2011. However, while SpaceX soared, Boeing stumbled. The Starliner program faced numerous technical challenges right from the start. Its first uncrewed orbital flight test in December 2019 missed its intended orbit due to a software glitch, sparking concerns about the craft's safety. A follow-up test flight in 2021 also hit roadblocks, with propulsion issues causing more delays. Then came the real-world consequences. In early 2023, several astronauts found themselves stranded aboard the ISS after repeated Starliner delays. Originally scheduled to return on the Starliner, these astronauts were stuck as the spacecraft's problems piled up. Issues like helium leaks and thruster malfunctions. Supplies on the ISS were running low, and the psychological toll of being stranded in space began to weigh heavily on the crew. Faced with this crisis, NASA had no choice but to turn to SpaceX for help. SpaceX's Dragon capsule, which had been reliably flying astronauts since 2020, was prepped for an emergency rescue mission. However, this was no ordinary mission, and there were serious concerns about whether the Dragon could safely bring the astronauts home under such dire conditions. But in the end, SpaceX pulled off the rescue, further cementing its place as the leader in private space travel while leaving Boeing's Starliner with even more questions to answer. But what happened next sent shockwaves through the entire space community. In early 2024, Elon Musk dropped a bombshell during a press conference. SpaceX engineers, while working with NASA to plan the rescue, had uncovered serious flaws in the Starliner design, flaws that had never been made public. Musk revealed that these issues, related to the spacecraft's propulsion and life support systems, posed significant risks to any crew aboard the Starliner. According to Musk, under certain conditions, these flaws could lead to catastrophic failures, endangering astronauts' lives. For the space industry, this wasn't just another technical problem, it was a crisis. Boeing and NASA were quick to fire back, insisting that the Starliner was safe and that any issues SpaceX identified were being addressed. But the damage was already done. Public confidence was shattered. The media seized on the controversy, with headlines calling into question Boeing's transparency and NASA's oversight. Suddenly, the once promising Starliner program was on the ropes, facing more scrutiny than ever before. The fallout from Musk's revelation was immediate and intense. There were calls for a full review of the Starliner program, with some even suggesting that Boeing's spacecraft should be scrapped altogether. Instead, many argued that NASA should rely solely on SpaceX's Dragon capsule for future crewed missions. After all, Dragon had a proven track record, safely ferrying astronauts to and from space since 2020. Boeing found itself scrambling. They launched an internal investigation to address Musk's concerns, working closely with NASA to implement new safety measures and test the Starliner systems further. But public trust is hard to win back, and despite these efforts, skepticism lingered. Was Boeing prioritizing competition over safety. The controversy didn't just affect Boeing, it raised serious questions about the future of NASA's Commercial Crew program as a whole. The program had been seen as a model for public-private partnership, fostering competition and innovation in space exploration. But with Starliner's failures on full display, many began to wonder if the program's goals were being met. Were private companies being held to the same rigorous safety standards as NASA? Or was profit taking precedence over astronaut safety? This episode also cast doubt on the broader role of private companies in space exploration. Critics argued that NASA needed to take a more hands-on approach, ensuring that safety and reliability came before profits. The stakes are simply too high. When human lives are on the line, there's no room for error. Space isn't just another industry, it's a frontier where one mistake can be fatal. International cooperation was another key issue that emerged from the Starliner crisis. The ISS is a collaborative effort involving multiple space agencies from around the world. The stranded astronauts weren't just American, they represented several different countries. This made the rescue mission a global concern, highlighting the need for clear protocols and contingency plans when things go wrong in space. If nothing else, this incident underscored the vital importance of international collaboration in space exploration. As Boeing worked to fix the Starliner's issues, one thing became clear: the future of space exploration would demand more than just cutting-edge technology. It would require accountability, transparency, and a renewed focus on safety above all else. As of now, Boeing's Starliner spacecraft has landed in New Mexico, wrapping up a 3-month test mission that faced technical issues and forced it to leave the 2 astronauts it carried temporarily stranded in space. The spacecraft touched down at White Sands Space Harbor in the New Mexico desert. That's all for today. What are your thoughts on Boeing's Starliner? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more content.